I never thought I'd be sitting here, sipping lukewarm coffee in a kitchen that used to feel like home, staring at the same peeling wallpaper I had once promised myself I'd replace. But some promises, I've learned, take decades to keep, and some grudges, even longer to satisfy. My name is Emma. I'm 32, and I've spent the better part of my life plotting the slow, careful undoing of the people who claimed to love me but spent 20 years shaping me into someone I was never meant to be. I can still remember the day it all started. I was 12, tucked in the corner of the living room, watching my parents laugh at a dinner I wasn't allowed to join. I had overheard the words, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the warmth of the kitchen like a knife. "She'll never amount to anything if we let her think she's in control." That sentence, tossed casually over mashed potatoes and gravy, planted a seed in me. A seed that, 20 years later, had grown into a plan so intricate, so precise, that even the slightest misstep could ruin everything. I run my fingers along the edge of a notebook, its leather cover worn from years of careful use. Inside, every detail of my life, every observation about my family, every small slip they ever made, they are all here. Names, dates, excuses, lies. I've documented their every move, every betrayal, every whispered insult that slipped under the guise of guidance or concern. And for years, I did nothing. I smiled, I nodded, I followed their rules while quietly learning their weaknesses. Today, I am 32, and my parents have no idea that the quiet girl they thought they controlled has become something entirely different. I've perfected the art of waiting, of patience, and I've learned that revenge is not about rage. It is about timing, subtlety, and the slow, inevitable tightening of a web in which they will find themselves trapped. As I pack my bag to leave the house, a single message vibrates on my phone. "I've been planning this revenge for 20 years. I will never give up. My family deserves this." It's not from anyone else, it's from me, a reminder I sent to myself years ago, a mantra to keep me focused on the path ahead. And now, it feels like the signal, the first real step in a journey I've been preparing for longer than anyone could imagine. I pause at the door, glancing back at the family portraits lining the hallway. Faces smiling, frozen in moments of happiness, masking the manipulation, the control, the subtle ways they shaped my life to suit their narrative. I inhale, steadying myself, knowing that once I leave, the countdown begins. Once I step outside, everything changes. Outside, the street is quiet. The sun is pale, casting long, hesitant shadows over the asphalt. I slide my bag over my shoulder and walk. Every step feels deliberate, a march toward a confrontation that has been 20 years in the making. I know they have no idea what is coming. And that's how it should be. I reach the first street corner and pause, pulling the notebook from my bag. I open it to a page marked with a thin, red ribbon. A date circled 2 decades ago, the first hint of my plan's ultimate goal. I trace the lines with my finger, reading the words I wrote as a teenager, words I never shared. "They think they have power over me. They will learn otherwise. Patience, observation, precision. Wait for the moment, then act." I smile, though it's not a happy smile. It's the calm before the storm, the satisfaction of a mind that has prepared meticulously, that knows the truth of its own power. Today is not the day I strike fully, it is only the beginning, but from this moment, nothing will ever be the same. And as I walk away from the house that tried to define me, a question lingers in my mind, a whisper beneath the thrill of anticipation. Which one of them will break first, and how will I make them see the consequences of their choices? The first step in any long game is observation. I parked my car a few blocks from my childhood home, pretending to tie my shoelaces while my parents' house sat quietly behind the hedges. They had no idea I was watching. My father was in the garden, pretending to prune roses but mostly talking to himself, muttering about debts and mistakes only he could understand. My mother, ever oblivious to the quiet currents beneath the family surface, arranged cutlery in the kitchen, humming a tune from the 60s. Neither of them saw the storm approaching. For 20 years, I had memorized every routine, every subtle quirk, every crack in the foundation of their carefully constructed lives. I knew when they woke, when they ate, and even when they whispered secrets to each other under the pretense of intimacy. All of it was useful now, like chess pieces waiting for a skilled hand. I pulled my notebook from the bag and flipped to a page marked Weaknesses. Each entry detailed a moment, a slip, a vulnerability that could be exploited without them suspecting. My first target was the lie they had hidden behind smiles for decades: my father's investments. As a teenager, I had stumbled upon letters that revealed he had gambled recklessly, losing vast sums while blaming circumstances or luck. My mother had covered for him, masking the damage with her own pretenses of control. Now, those secrets were weapons. My plan wasn't impulsive or cruel, it was meticulous, surgical. Every move had been considered, every reaction predicted. I slipped into the back alley beside their home, careful to avoid the motion sensor lights. This was the first test. The moment I entered the garage through the side door, I felt the thrill of control. Here, in this narrow, cluttered space, I could see decades of deception firsthand. Ledgers hidden in false bottoms, checkbooks tucked behind dusty boxes, envelopes filled with letters meant to remain unread. I photographed everything with my phone, labeling each image meticulously. Proof, evidence, leverage, it was all there. Suddenly, I heard a noise from inside the house. A chair scraping against the floor, faint but unmistakable. I froze. My mother's voice, calling out for my father, seemed innocent, but instinct told me otherwise. She was unaware of me, but that didn't mean she wasn't a threat. I pressed myself against the wall, letting the shadows swallow me, and waited until she disappeared again. As I stepped back into the street, my heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. Each secret I gathered, each piece of truth I documented, brought me closer to the day when the balance of power would shift entirely. I could almost feel the first tremors of their downfall, invisible yet inevitable. Back at my apartment, I spread the evidence across the table, lining it up like cards in a game only I understood. I traced the edges of each photograph, each ledger entry, each letter, imagining the faces of my parents when the truth came crashing down around them. For decades, they had laughed at my obedience, my silence, my willingness to follow rules that didn't benefit me. But silence had its power too, and now mine was stronger than anything they could have imagined. Then came the message, a new one, unexpected, appearing on my phone as if the universe itself was signaling me: the first move has been seen. They won't know what hit them. Keep going. I smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of my lips. That was all I needed. Step 1 was complete, but step 2 would require careful manipulation, patience, and a deeper understanding of their emotional vulnerabilities. I knew exactly where to begin, the one secret that had defined every argument, every holiday, every smile that masked resentment. And as I prepared to leave for the next stage, a question echoed in my mind, sharper than any dagger: which of them will crumble first when confronted with the truth, and will the other even survive the revelation? The morning air smelled faintly of rain and the faint musk of my parents' old garden. I parked 2 blocks away, pretending to jog, my heart drumming not from exertion, but from the anticipation of the moment I had planned for 2 decades. Today, I would test the first domino, their pride, the fragile shield behind which they had hidden for years. I slipped into the side alley again, but this time I carried more than observation tools. I had printed copies of the ledgers, letters, and photographs I had meticulously gathered the night before. Each one represented not just a secret, but a weapon. My first target, my father. I knew his vanity and fear of public embarrassment could be turned against him. He believed his mistakes had been invisible, hidden beneath layers of charm and manipulation. Today, that illusion would shatter. I entered the garage, silent as a shadow. The faint creak of the hinges reminded me how well I had memorized every sound in this house. My father's desk was the same as I remembered, cluttered, chaotic, but with that unmistakable attempt at order only he understood. I arranged the letters carefully on the surface, forming a timeline he could not deny. Then I placed a single envelope on the kitchen counter where I knew he would see it first, addressed simply in my handwriting: read this before anyone else sees it. Inside, I had written only what was necessary: the truth about the failed investments, the hidden debts, the lies spun to protect his fragile ego, and most importantly, the evidence that connected every falsehood to its consequence. I slipped out before he returned, leaving no trace of my presence but the envelope. By noon, he found it. I watched from the window across the street as he picked it up, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. He read, his posture stiffening, his face draining of color. Every lie he had told, every smile meant to deceive, every confidence manipulated, laid bare in ink and photographs. The first crack appeared almost immediately. My father's voice, usually so steady, shattered as he called my mother into the kitchen. The conversation was muted from my vantage point, but I could read the tension in their posture. She paled, realizing the extent of what he had found. The silent, invisible foundation of their authority was already shifting. But I didn't stop there. I knew better than to assume a single blow could topple decades of control. The second part of my plan required subtlety and timing. I sent a message to my mother, anonymous, hinting at another discovery. Something about her own past, a long-forgotten secret she had buried with precision. By evening, the house was filled with whispers, frantic movements, and the first signs of panic. I watched their perfect facade unravel from the quiet of my car. Every glance, every muffled argument, every trembling hand, the pieces of the puzzle were moving exactly as I had anticipated. And yet, even as I reveled in the first victory, a new question formed in my mind. A shadow lurking at the edge of my plan. What if the secret I haven't discovered yet is the one that could turn the tables on me instead? I knew only one thing for certain. Tonight, my parents slept uneasy for the first time in decades. Tomorrow, I would take the next step, and the real game of revelations would begin. The next morning, the sunlight felt sharper somehow, as if the world itself had grown aware of the tension inside my parents' house. I watched from my car again, pretending to sip coffee while they moved restlessly in the kitchen. Their faces were pale, eyes darting, fingers fidgeting, the first signs of true fear. But fear alone wasn't enough. It could make them paranoid, but it wouldn't make them confess. I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something they couldn't spin, hide, or blame on me. I had discovered hints of it the night before, buried in a box of my mother's old letters in the attic, references to a name I hadn't recognized, dates that didn't match any family event, mentions of money, property, and someone who had been paid to stay silent. The threads were thin, fragile, but I knew if I pulled carefully, the tapestry would unravel. I returned to the attic just after dusk, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. Dust coated everything like a forgotten past, and the old wooden floorboards groaned beneath me. I opened the box fully this time and sorted through the letters, following the trail of cryptic initials and coded phrases. There it was, a set of receipts, forged documents, and a letter addressed to someone named HM. I didn't know who HM was, but I could feel the weight of the secret in my chest, the pulse of danger. I also found photographs. My parents, smiling in family portraits, yet subtly different. A hand holding something hidden behind their backs, a shadow of someone else in the background. The edges of deceit were thinner than paper, and I could cut through them if I played it right. But as I pieced it together, a shiver ran down my spine. One photograph was of me, not as I am now, but as a child, my expression tense, eyes wide, standing beside a stranger my parents never spoke about. Someone who had clearly been part of my life yet had vanished without explanation. The realization hit me, my revenge plan was only scratching the surface. There were secrets here older and darker than my anger, and some might implicate me if exposed recklessly. That night, I sent an anonymous note to my father, hinting I had found HM and that the letters and photographs were only the beginning. I watched the reactions remotely, through the cracked blinds, and I saw the first real cracks in their composure. My mother's hands shook as she held the letters close to her chest. My father paced, muttering fragments of names and dates I had never heard before. And then, a new development I hadn't predicted. A message arrived on my phone from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Emma. You don't know what you're getting into." I stared at the screen, heart hammering. The threat was real, calculated, and chillingly specific. Someone else knew about the secret, or at least enough to scare me. My parents were not the only players in this game. Yet, I didn't stop. The stakes had just risen, and so had my determination. I realized now that the path to justice wasn't only about exposing their lies. It was about surviving the ghosts of the past that lurked closer than I had imagined. And in the silence of the night, I whispered to myself, brushing a strand of hair from my eyes, if they thought they could scare me, they've underestimated 20 years of patience. The next morning, I woke with a weight pressing on my chest, heavier than any before. The unknown message from last night had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Someone new, someone powerful, someone connected not only to my parents' lies but to the invisible web of secrets I was only beginning to untangle. And yet, despite the fear, a spark of exhilaration burned within me. I had spent 20 years waiting for this moment, and now the shadows were finally stepping into the light. I started by revisiting the attic, meticulously sorting through each envelope, photo, and letter. The more I examined, the more the pieces connected, forming a map of deceit, betrayal, and unspoken crimes. My parents weren't just hiding money or documents. They were hiding a history that involved other people, people who had vanished, and people whose absence explained so much of my childhood unease. I realized that HM, the mysterious figure referenced in the letters, had been the linchpin of every secret they'd kept. Determined to confront the truth, I followed a series of addresses hidden in the letters, each one leading to small, nondescript buildings across the city. One led to a storage unit, dusty and dimly lit, containing crates labeled with my initials and others I recognized from the photographs. Inside, I found evidence of my parents' manipulations: financial statements, old contracts, letters, and photographs showing meetings with people I didn't know. One photo froze me in place, a younger version of my mother and father shaking hands with a man whose face was partially obscured, yet I could feel the weight of his gaze even from decades ago. Then, my phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number: "You're closer than you think. But step carefully, some ghosts don't forgive." I couldn't tell if it was a warning or a challenge, but my pulse surged. I was no longer just unraveling their lies. I was stepping into a confrontation that had been set in motion long before I was born. That evening, I returned home, every shadow in the house seeming to watch me. I found my parents sitting in the living room, pretending normalcy, but their eyes betrayed them. My father's hand shook as he poured tea, my mother's smile faltered whenever I glanced at her. I placed the photographs from the storage unit on the coffee table, arranging them carefully. "Do you recognize him?" I asked, my voice calm, measured. Their silence was deafening, but I pressed on. "Do you know what all this means?" My mother finally spoke, voice trembling. "Emma, you don't understand. We were trying to protect you." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Protect me? Or protect yourselves?" The room fell silent again. Then my father's face hardened. "You don't know the half of it," he muttered. That was the crack I needed. The first admission that the past wasn't just hidden. It was alive, and it could fight back. I realized that confronting them wasn't just about exposing what they'd done. It was about navigating the dangers of what they still could do, and what others tied to HM might do to keep their secrets buried. As night fell, I sat alone in my room, the photographs and letters spread around me. Every clue, every piece of the puzzle, now painted a picture of betrayal far deeper than I had imagined. But I also felt a strange calm settling over me. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had the knowledge, the evidence, and the patience of 20 years behind me. And as I lay in bed, the moonlight spilling over the papers, a thought formed clearly in my mind: tomorrow, I take the next step. I confront the ghosts not just of my parents' making, but of a past that tried to control my life before I could even remember it. The stage was set. The secrets were exposed, but the real confrontation, the reckoning, was still to come. Dawn broke with a pale light filtering through my blinds, casting thin shadows across the room. I felt unusually calm for the storm I knew was coming. Every envelope, every photograph, every secret I had uncovered over the last few weeks had led to this moment. Today, I wasn't just confronting my parents. I was confronting the entire web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that had haunted my life since childhood. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that projected control, not aggression. I wanted every move, every word, to carry the weight of someone who had spent 20 years preparing for this. My heart still pounded, but the fear had transformed into a sharp, focused energy. I grabbed the folder containing all the documents from the storage unit, the evidence that could dismantle every carefully constructed excuse, every alibi, every lie. The meeting place was a small, private room in a law office I had rented for the day, neutral ground. My parents arrived, their eyes wide with suspicion, masked unease barely hidden behind practiced expressions. Behind them, shadowed in the doorway, I noticed two figures I hadn't expected. People connected to HM, the mysterious figure from the old letters. Their presence confirmed everything I had feared. the stakes were higher than I'd imagined. I started methodically, placing the photographs and letters on the table. "For 20 years, I've waited for this," I said, voice steady. "You tried to manipulate, to hide, to erase the truth. But I've collected everything: the lies, the contracts, the agreements, the proof of your schemes." My parents exchanged quick, tense glances, searching for a response, a defense, but none came. I continued, "Do you know what 20 years of planning looks like? It looks like preparation, patience, and finally accountability. Today, all of it comes to light." I laid out every secret connection, every hidden transaction, every carefully disguised act meant to control me. The room went silent, each revelation hitting like a hammer. The figures in the doorway shifted, realizing the depth of what had been uncovered. My parents' faces went pale, their carefully constructed facade crumbling piece by piece. And then, as if on cue, I revealed the final document, the most damning evidence, the one that tied everything together. Their eyes went wide, a mix of shock, fear, and recognition crossing their features. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I simply let the evidence speak for itself, letting the years of preparation speak louder than their excuses. Finally, I looked each of them in the eye. "I've spent my life running in circles, controlled by secrets and lies. No more. Today you're accountable, not just to me, but to the truth. And make no mistake, I will never give up." The room remained silent for a moment, the weight of my declaration settling over everyone present. Then my parents, beaten not by force but by undeniable proof, could only nod silently. I stood, gathering the documents, feeling the release that comes not from vengeance alone, but from claiming the life that had always been mine. As I walked out into the sunlight, the shadows of the past clinging faintly to my heels, I felt a sense of closure and power that I had never known. 20 years of planning, patience, and careful action had culminated not in chaos, but in the calm certainty that justice, in its own way, had been served. I looked back once, and for the first time, I saw them not as threats, but as figures diminished by the truth. And as I stepped forward, free at last from their manipulation, I whispered to myself, "This life, this voice, this power, they are mine. And no one can ever take them away."